Hello everyone and welcome to this Our Toy service. Welcome if you are joining us here today in the Turner Hall. Welcome if you are joining us online. Welcome if you are joining us in spirit. As you know, I am Louise Reed and I am the worship leader here at Newcastle Unitarians. As I think many of you know by now, we are live streaming the service and we will be recording it, but the camera is just focused forwards on me, not on members of the congregation. So, let us begin, as always, by saying aloud the values that unite our community here at Newcastle on Tyne Unitarians. As free thinkers, this is our statement of the values we hold in common as we journey together. We welcome all who seek the meaning of life and who believe that human spirituality is wider than any one tradition and deeper than any one set of opinions. With a respect for our Christian origins, we seek to explore truths from all sources. Our fellowship gives us strength and encouragement in daily living. So, as those of you who were joining us last week know, we've slightly changed the order of Advent. It's a unilateral decision we've taken right here. And usually there are 4 Sundays in December before Christmas. But since we have decided that we're not having a Christmas Eve service because many of us will have travelled to be with our families, we are moving up our Advent readings. So I shall now go and light 2 candles for Advent. But first, let us contemplate this reading, which is for the 2nd Sunday of Advent, which is peace. In the settle and stir of a burnt orange sunrise, in the lilting laughter or memory of a table full of friends, in the flash of clarity that turns on the light of insight and leads us toward wisdom, we find the peace that passes all understanding. But there are things we need to understand. Help us hear you in the stories of those who struggle. Peace is what the prophets were told. Peace is what is sacrificed when profit takes precedence. Let us light a candle for peace and pray for the courage to stand up for it. In this 2nd week of Advent, as the waiting and expectation heighten, let us deepen our desire for peace in this world. Like the wise called to journey in those early dawning days, may we seek, search and strive for peace. Like prophets old and new, may we call out for its coming. We light a candle for peace, may it light the way. And I feel I should note there are some congregations who have actually chosen that they will not light their 2nd candle during Advent due to the ongoing struggle, because it is the peace candle, and as we all well know, there are many wars going on in our world. I thought that we would light our candles as a sign of light and hope, but I think let us all remember that point being made, which is that we must always continue to work for peace. The candle lighting continues. At least it will if I win my ever ongoing struggle with the matches, as I light our chalice for today. And this is a chalice lighting for the Advent season by May Sheldon. Rabbi, teacher, wonderful counselor, Lamb of God, light of love, anointed one, word of bread and life, child of God and human, Emmanuel, kindle our chalice today. Set our hearts ablaze with pure and radical love. Help us towards faith that can heal the sick and feed the hungry. Be with us now. Help us to welcome the refugee, to work to stave off all harm to the innocent. Show us the example of your mercy, and help us to see that for the smallest, the humblest, for the least of these, shall burn the brightest star. May it be so. Before we have our first hymn today, I thought people might like to hear a little bit of the origin of the toy story here at Newcastle Unitarians. We're certainly not the only congregation to do this, but as with all congregations, there was a particular point in our history when we decided we would. So, this is the origins of the toy service with Reverend J.H. Coram Davis, who was our minister here from 1951 to 57. This was written, of course, by Morris March. Reverend Coram Davis certainly had a hard act to follow, as he was the successor to the Reverend Herbert Barnes. Born in Wales, he had been on Tyneside during his early teens, when his father was appointed the Marine Superintendent of Shipbuilding for a Cardiff firm at the Northumberland Shipbuilding Company Yard at Howden. After leaving school, he spent 4 years before the mast, followed by academic studies at Oxford, Wales and Manchester. He completed his theological training at Unitarian College, Manchester, interesting link there, but watch and see, and took up his first ministry at Cardiff Church, where he had been a member. He moved to Lewins Mead, Bristol, in 1945, before he accepted the invitation to come and minister at Newcastle in 1951, on the retirement of Reverend Herbert Barnes. In those days, the church owned a manse in Jennifer Grove, Eton, and Mr. and Mrs. Davis moved in with their son Hugh. The calendar for December 1951 included the announcement of a toy service to be held at the evening service on the 16th of December. This was the great innovation of Coram Davis and established a tradition which continues today. When first introduced, children from the senior and junior Sunday schools would take part. Originally, the toys bought were second-hand and would be given by the children to go to those less fortunate than themselves. The Christmas tree with its coloured lights was also introduced, and the senior children would collect toys from the congregation by the light cast from the tree. So a little of our history there. I mentioned Unitarian College, Manchester. It is now known as Harris Manchester College, and not actually to do with our former minister, George Harris. It was a benefactor who was also named Harris. I mention that because, as many of you know, as we prepare to move to our new home, we've been trying to find homes for various historical artefacts. And Harris Manchester College are most likely going to take some of them, including some of our church portraits. So I mention that as a way of saying that it's still to be determined, but many of our historical items should find a good home where hopefully other people can see them. And we'll now have our second reading, which Diana is going to give, Toys of Childhood.
Toys of Childhood by Celia Midgley. Thank God for toys of childhood, for whips and tops and swirling colours that whizzed into one dizziness and then wobbled to a stop, like an exhilarated, exhausted dancer, till picked up and painted, ready for the next fling. For yo-yos, less graceful, more jerky, and all string round my fingers. For dolls, 1, 2, 7 in a row at the foot of my bed. Black, white, and broken-armed, and rabbit, and bear, and wooden giraffe on wheels that I pulled backwards down the stairs, top to bottom at 6, and survived the fall. For the snow house at Christmas, a cotton wool covered box, as real as any doll's house or fortress, and I would delve for hidden treasures, small wrapped trinkets, loving most the house itself, like Alice enchanted, safe inside. And a photo of me in post-war grey, holding a windmill on a stick, plastic rainbow, red, blue, yellow, outside our seaside digs, and the neat hair in a tidy bow, and the innocent smile against all fears. Wrap me, love, in a cardboard casket, tie me with tinsel, and tell me I'm precious. Give me to children, whose gift is in creating, and God preserve our playing.
Thank you for that. I do love that reading because it captures some of the innocence and wonder of childhood, which which I think toys are very much evoking us. I'll admit it actually made me think also of a conversation actually makes me think now of a conversation I was having last night in the pub. I was drinking orange juice. Well, maybe we might have had one half to celebrate Newcastle's victory. And we also, for some reason, the conversation turned to decorating Christmas trees, and people were talking about how no matter where you are or how often you've moved, there's always at least one decoration lurking at the back of the box, which clearly belonged to somebody's granny or elderly relative, and nobody quite knows its origins, but you have to put it on the tree anyway. Hopefully avoiding any naked flames, because in those days health and safety was a bit more important. And with that spirit of hope, let's have our litany for Advent. This is a responsive prayer. You'll find the words on the back of the order of service, and as ever, written by Reverend Clifford. So join in as you will with the words written in bold. It is Advent. Expectation rises. The cards arrive, the candles are lit. The children can't wait. Let Christmas come. The lights go up in homes, streets and public squares. Shopping reaches fever pitch and tempers fray. Let Christmas come. The ancient story is retold. Tea-towelled shepherds, wise men in little dressing gowns, follow the tinsel star to a myriad youthful Bethlehems. Let Christmas come. Carol singers take to the streets for causes worthy and causes dubious, hoping perhaps for mince pies and mulled wine as their reward. Let Christmas come. From fan-vaulted magnificence to vandalised resilience, every chapel and church prepares to greet Emmanuel. Let Christmas come. Let us pause for breath, to listen to the turning earth, to feel the childhood magic stirring in our memories, maybe to hear the angels sing. Let us join in the communion of silence. It's Advent. In the darkness, hope will be reborn again. Let it come to us, let it come through us, let Christmas come. And we now have a couple of minutes for our own silent prayer and reflection, and after that we'll have some music. I have to say that one of the things that makes preparing services a bit easier in this day and age is the existence of websites that are essentially Google for the Bible. If you type in hanging symbol into the bar, you can instantly get the full text of St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, in whichever translation and interpretation of the Bible you care to name. I can, however, vouch for the fact that if you put in toys, you won't get anything very much at all. The Magi famously didn't take any gifts of immediate use to a baby, although his parents no doubt appreciated the gold. And the closest you can get is another of St. Paul's famous teachings, from which this service takes its title. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Yet at the same time, we know that Christ himself welcomed children. We know from Matthew chapter 19. Then people brought children to Jesus to put his hands upon them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them for doing that. Yet Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And then he placed his hands upon them and prayed. Earlier in Matthew, Jesus is even more explicit about this. In chapter 18 we read, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and said, 'Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' Jesus brought forth a child from the crowd and said, 'Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like one of these, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom.'" Leaving the reader or student perhaps wondering what exactly it is we are supposed to be doing. Are we meant to become like a child, or are we meant to put away childish things? I could at this point go off into a sideline about the extent to which Christianity is the creation of Jesus or to what extent it's the creation of St. Paul. That would be an interesting sermon and probably an entirely different one. I am slightly reminded, one of my own pleasures is reading comics and graphic novels. I've recently been reading one called Second Coming, in which the premise, I imagine, was originally Jesus returns and lives as Superman's roommate. It is also rather obvious from reading the comic that at some point DC Comics lawyers got involved and said, no, it can't be actual Superman. Just draw him looking like Superman, but it's not actual Superman. I mention this because when Jesus returns and moves in to live with Superman equivalent, I'll call him Hero Man, and his wife, one of them mentions St. Paul, and Jesus turns around and said, who? I never had any followers called that. But how to reconcile these two teachings? Continuing my diligent Google searching, and thinking of Advent and the time of the year, I did revisit this quote from C.S. Lewis about childish things, which I think points us forwards. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be terribly grown up. There's a saying that a new world is created every time a child is born, because the child is a completely new person who has never existed before on this earth. They will see the world in a way which is unique to them. We share many things, but each of us is a unique creation, and every time a little person comes into the world, that person brings the possibility of something new. Surely this is why Christmas and the Christmas story continues to mean so much even in our now largely secular society. The promise of hope embodied in a newborn baby born in the bleak depths of winter will always have a powerful appeal. Children, as we see when they play, are not limited like we adults. They create entire worlds, imagine things that do not exist, and then when they turn into teenagers, start berating us for our failures to imagine worlds without suffering, worlds without prejudice, worlds without war, and worlds without climate change. They are not hidebound by habit, but conceive an entire world of possibilities. And I have heard of some teachings that say that this is the truth of Jesus' teaching about becoming like a child. Partly, of course, it was also part of one of the great messages of his teachings, which is that whilst Jesus lived in a very patriarchal status within society, as many human societies have been, he focused so much on the inherent worth of all human beings, and in bringing forth a child, who in that society would probably very much have been expected to sit down and shut up, something Jesus himself notably didn't do when he was 12 years old, if you know the story of him in the temple. I wonder if he was thinking of his own childhood self. We know so little of the childhood of Jesus, but that is the way for so many historical figures. But the teaching I once heard is that Jesus was saying very much that we must have the sense of wonder and open-mindedness and fascination with the world that children can have, as opposed to being continually hidebound by habit and now incessant striving for status and the desire to be terribly grown up. But at the same time, we know that children are needy and vulnerable. They are not fully developed, they don't fully understand the world yet, and they cannot survive without adults to look after them. A large part of why children and young animals everywhere play is to learn about the world around them, how it works, and how to develop the skills they need to survive. There are many different ways to understand the words of St. Paul, but perhaps one way to understand it is to think of a situation we all go through at some point in our lives. When a crisis arrives in our family or at work or in our spiritual community, and we look around for the most senior, knowledgeable, most grown-up person in the room and realise it's me. Writers from J. M. Barrie to Lewis himself, to Philip Pullman, have confronted this most basic fact of human life. At some point we have to grow up if we're going to survive and look after those around us. And the world does need looking after. After I finish speaking, we will sing and then bring up our toys to the front, and these toys will go to children in need in the local community. We don't really need to think very hard to think of children in even greater need around the world, be it Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, places afflicted by famine and floods, so many more. We know that as we turn to the bright lights of Christmas to cheer us up in the depths of midwinter, others are shivering and starving. We must hold in balance our need for joy alongside the world's need for our hard work and love for others. But as Lewis's words show, we can always keep the childlike side of ourselves, that sense of wonder and possibility alive. Let's leave behind the desire to be something or someone else and remain open-minded and hopeful. We've heard from Amara Dyer, the Buddhist minister who has led worship for us here a few times this year, that one of the sources of human suffering is when we get attached to our stuck ideas of how the world should be, rather than being open to it as it is. And indeed, one of the most Buddhist films of this year was about one of the most famous toys of all time, Barbie. Has anyone here seen the Barbie movie? Right, well, it's been out for a while, you've had the chance to see it and not be spoiled, so spoilers. At the start of the film, Barbie is living in Barbie Land, a colourful paradise of toys where no one gets ill or old, no one has to worry about being poor or hungry, and no one dies. If you are familiar or you've even just heard the story of the Buddha's early years, sheltered by his overprotective father, this might sound familiar. But Barbie finds herself feeling ill, and for the first time is plagued by thoughts no one else in her world seems to share. She mentions that she is afraid of death. A mentor, a wise, older Barbie, an earlier model of the toy, advises her to find the child in the real world who is playing with the doll version of her, because that child's fears are what are causing her to be so unhappy. So Barbie, accompanied by Ken, ventures outside Barbie Land, and in one of the film's most famous scenes, she finds herself sitting on a bench in the real world, where she observes a distraught, crying woman being comforted by a friend, and an older woman sitting peacefully contemplating the day. The Buddha, when he ventured out of his palace, encountered 4 sights that set him on the path to enlightenment: sickness and suffering, death, old age, and a mentor who advised him to seek out a spiritual path. This may sound familiar. As a toy, Barbie was created to try to show little girls a world of possibilities, which is not to say she's perfect, and the film does go into some detail about some of the problems toys can cause for children. Barbie is famously a very specific idea of what women should look like. But the film also shows what toys have always offered us, a world in which the only limits are our imagination, where prejudices can be left behind. And we see that Barbie, who didn't come from a world in which the signs of old age seem to be somehow something to be hidden away by society, turns to the old woman, who is the first old person she has ever actually seen, and smiles and comments very much like a child would. "Why, you're beautiful." The woman smiles at her and gently replies, "I know it." St. Paul spoke of putting away childish things, but more famously he spoke of the importance of love. Let us strive at this time to keep love in our hearts and always to remain open to our dreams of what the world might be. May it be so. As we put out the physical flame of our chalice, may its light remain within our hearts until we gather once more. Let's close with these words by the Reverend Cliff Reed. Awaiting conjunction. As the advent flame is kindled, the shepherds on their dark hillside somewhere out of time are undisturbed by angels. In their fabled palaces, the Magi have yet to see the new star and wonder what it means. Myth and history await conjunction. The timeless tale awaits retelling. And hearts await its promise of a new beginning. May it be so.